Well, good afternoon. I decided to go ahead and make a video that kind of builds on some posts that I've been doing recently, and it's titled About Signs That You Need a Fractional COO. Now, these are pointed questions that are getting asked, and really what I'm going to try to do here is describe why you need to seriously consider the possibility that a fractional COO is going to be the solution to the problems that is facing you. One thing that you might immediately think is, especially when you look at what a fractional COO or CFO provide us, oh, I can do that. Well, if you can do that, why haven't you done it already? So, what I want to do is kind of talk through some of the signs that, you know, you really could use some additional help in getting where you need to, as opposed to where you currently are. So, the first group is valuation disagreement signals. Now, there are a lot of questions here that could be uh, really raised that would align with this, such as like I think my business is worth more, or the valuation I'm hearing doesn't reflect the work that I'm putting in, or I can't get the exit price I need for retirement. What that is showing is really there are several things that are going on there. First, it is showing on that in your case, you are looking at what is being offered and you're just simply going, that's just not going to be sufficient for what I need. And in addition to that, you're also looking at this business and think, okay, my life's work that I've just put blood, sweat, and tears into could not possibly be worth this amount of money. Those are all very valid observations and reasons. But the reality is, if you're having a valuation disagreement, you're not going to win that, because here's why. What this company has come in and said your business is worth, it's not like you're going to find somebody who's going to look and go, oh yeah, I agree, I think it is worth this amount. No, there are some certain reasons why that business is valued differently. And what you're going to need to do likely is you're going to need to take a look at it and figure out what those are and address them, so that way the value can increase. So that is an area that if you're looking at and thinking, okay, these valuation issues, how do we resolve them? Well, that's kind of what I do. My goal is to come in and try to figure out, okay, how can we fix things so that way we're able to get as much value as possible. The next group of questions is emotional attachment or legacy signals. These are some very important questions that are really uh, important to address. Yeah, you view the business as your baby and you can't imagine somebody else running this differently. Let me clue you in here on some things that'll be really helpful. 100% of people exit their business. You're not going to be any different. So the reality is, whether you like it or not, somebody else is going to need to run it. Okay, the business is my baby. Well, I have young children too. And one day they're not only going to likely be looking after me and taking care of me, but they are going to outlive me. So the reality here is this is yes, there's emotional attachment and there's importance of legacy. That means we need to make sure and do our best to get everything structured so that legacy is going to live on. Having an external viewpoint come in and figure out, okay, how do we do that? What do you want? Well, in the work that I do, one of the first assessments I do is give out a cultural assessment. The entire objective of this is to figure out what is it that you hold near and dear so that we can make sure and preserve that as much as possible. Past decisions and baggage signals, that is another big thing that could really derail things. We've made some past decisions over the years that might be issues. There could be bookkeeping that needs to be cleaned up. Uh, you know, Business owners will make use the run deductions and personal expenses through the business that that is going to have an impact, just because of the fact, while you do get nice deductions sometimes, the reality is at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay for that. So, you know, the reality is nobody is perfect. No business is going to be flawless. When I come in, my goal isn't necessarily to tell you, okay, what we need to do here is this, and this. And oh, I'm sorry, since you're not there, we're not going to be able to get there. No, where you are is your starting point. The goal is to be like, okay, yes, we made past decisions, there's baggage. Yes, everybody has that. What is important here is making sure that we don't just leave it at that and we actually address it, find ways to get things cleaned up, maybe improve. Obviously, some things, that's it's going to be baked in, we may not be able to do much with, but the reality is there's a lot of stuff that can be done to negate the impacts of those. Founder dependency, and this can also be on the dependency on the owner. And really, the fastest way that you can determine whether or not your business is too heavily dependent on you is to ask this question. If I were to go away for an entire month, what would happen? Let's stop and think about that. If you were to go away for 1 month, could your business function? If you're saying, well, I'm not even sure I could be away for a week and it function, there is the problem. The reality is, if you were ever in a situation where you couldn't step aside for any amount of time, you have a business that is dependent on you to the point that it cannot function without you. No one is going to want to buy that. Or what they might do is they will buy it at a steep discount. It'd be a business that maybe would normally be worth 50 million, but they may decide to give you 10 million for it. Simple reason, somebody's going to have to come and figure out how to make it work when you're gone. And as a result, because of that, they're going to realize, okay, well, we're going to have to do something like this, probably restructure everything, gut it. So here's the reality is, when it comes to dependency on you as the owner or the founder, if you have too much dependence, if your business is too dependent on you, that is a big problem. There's an adage in exit planning that we like to discuss, and that is this: if you are valuable to your business is not valuable. In other words, you need to get to the point where it doesn't matter if you're there, it can function. If you're not at that point, you're not ready to exit and you're not ready to maximize your value. So, next group, data and analytics. You know, this is something that, it has had different terms over the year. Probably one will be business intelligence. But the reality is this: how much into the nitty gritty do you get, or does your business get? Because here's the reality with analytics: the more you use and really try to distill your business, study customer interactions, study trends, really try to get into as much of the numbers that you have and really try to see behind them. The more that you're able to do that, the better you will be able to understand what makes your business tick. You'll be able to identify KPIs. Now, obviously, when it comes to KPIs in business, or when it comes to exit planning, there are different KPIs that we would look at pretty much across the board. But the reality is, industries and businesses within those industries have unique KPIs. I remember one business that I worked some with. One of the KPIs was actually contacts with clients. And really, what we were looking at was like, okay, roughly how many contacts will we need to have in the over the course of a quarter? And we would basically be able to we've had figured out pretty scientifically, if we had a set number of contacts with clients, that would translate into a certain amount of income. And it was within about 3% accuracy. But the way that you get there is you actually really delve deeply into all of the numbers in your business. You try to collect as much information as possible and then study it, so that way you can understand patterns of behavior that customers have. So that in turn would help you to do forecasting, which could in turn help you with cash flow forecasting as well. Budget and financial control issues. I've worked with businesses that really didn't have a budget. They really didn't have control processes. They basically decided, okay, whatever we need, we'll get it. That can work, but I've also worked with in businesses that we had processes that would require, okay, um, we would require votes over for expenditures over a certain amount. We actually had the budget process, so that way we could actually track it per quarter, really study and see where things were going. So all that to say is, if you do not have a budget and financial control process in place, why would anybody want to buy your business? Because for starters, you don't know how much you are going to be spending in the upcoming year. You also, as a part of the budget, probably have no idea how much money you're going to be taking in. And if you don't have controls in place to make sure that certain expenditures have sign offs, or you cannot go over a certain amount without formal approval or oversight like that, if you do not have stuff like that in place, that is where bad actors can very quickly jump in and take advantage of you. Strategic planning is key. And, a business that does not plan strategically is a business that, simply put, does not know where it's going. You can't be reactive and be successful. You need to be proactive. You need to be looking ahead, thinking, okay, where does this business want to be in 5 years? And then when you figure that out, like, okay, you figure out how you're going to get there. You study the trends financially and figure out, okay, the way that we're growing, where where will we be able to achieve these goals in 5 years or 10 years? What do we need to do in order to achieve them? So basically, it's not a matter of a wish list. It's a matter of, okay, what we need to do is we need to sit down and not only figure out where we want to be, but how we're going to get there. That is strategic planning. It's not just, basically, I want this for Christmas. Process, policy, and procedure gaps. Here's the reality. When it comes to documented processes, policies, and procedures, this is something that could make or break a business sale. Why? Well, if you don't have things written down, how do people know what to do? Especially if you or other people leave the business. Things cannot live inside somebody's head. They need to be documented, so that way, regardless of if it's you or someone else or a successor 50 years from now, they're able to look and think, okay, here is what the policy is for situations like this. This is what the procedures are for us to, when this department gets it, and how we're supposed to handle it. This is the entire process that's involved, from when something arrives to when we have the actual product that has been fabricated and ships out. In other words, everything needs to be written down carefully. Operations optimization. The reality is, with most businesses, when it comes to operations and optimization, um, most businesses, they have figured out how to make things work. They may, most likely, they've not figured out how to make things work well. I remember a business that I worked with once, that when it came time for um, digitizing the documentation process and collecting information from the field at the office, uh, it transformed things operationally from a business perspective night and day. No longer were we waiting for days for information to come in from the field, but we were getting it within minutes of when it was submitted. Sometimes, things could be processed, within, say, maybe 5 minutes. What used to be a cumbersome process was greatly streamlined. And that, I'm using that as an example, but my point here is this: just because it works doesn't mean it is the best solution. In order to operationally optimize things, we just need to look and think, okay, how can we get this done as efficiently as possible? And, you know, one good example is like, well, I know that we're inefficient, but I don't know where to start. Well, let's start by trying to figure out where the most time, um, basically where are we losing as much time as possible. That's always a big thing. Where are we leaking time? Where are we leaking money? Just trying to find ways to eliminate huge losses, whether it be in time or finances, and just start from there. Marketing is important. In fact, I remember recently seeing, um, with a marketing strategy, I've seen a wide range of things businesses will do. In fact, I remember working with a business owner once who's like, yeah, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, then we won't do it. The reality is a lot of stuff got discontinued. And part of the reason for that was, it would only be tried for a few weeks. Well, if you're only trying something for a few weeks, that's not going to give it a chance to really succeed. And here's the reason why. What most people think of when they think of marketing is they think of advertising. Advertising is not the same thing as marketing. Marketing, you're trying to build a brand, which means you have to have the long view. It's a multi-year view where you're going to stick with things. You're going to identify different channels to tell your story, preferably ones where your target market use, and you're going to really focus specifically on just making sure that messaging just gets out there. Now, some signs that you really need to address this is, yeah, our marketing is ad hoc and we're too dependent on one channel for our leads. And, or better yet, we don't track our marketing ROI. Well, if you're not doing this, then the reality is you got to figure out how to develop a strategy, but then also make sure it's working. And here's the thing, this isn't something you can decide, okay, let's try it for a few weeks and see if it's going to work. You can experiment, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is, if you're going to try to experiment with a marketing strategy for a few weeks, it's never going to work. You need to be thinking, okay, this is in it for the long haul. And really, what the goal for the long haul is, it's all about building your brand. Another big thing is technology concerns. Tech stack. It's with the advent of AI, the game has changed. It's not changed dramatically to the point that some people have said 86% of the workforce is going to be out of a job. I think what's going to probably happen is there are going to be some jobs lost, but there are going to be some, maybe even more jobs created just because of what AI does. But all that to say is, the tech stack, it's going to become outdated. Some tech stacks, they're going to have add-ons for AI that are really not going to be beneficial. And sometimes the tech stack, it's just your approach. It's just not where your business is, especially if you're using spreadsheets for everything. I remember working with one business that's all they did. It was spreadsheets, and thankfully, I was able to get them onto something different where we used CRM for customer records, and we were able to upgrade the budgeting so that way we were able to use um, accounting software for that. But just using spreadsheets for everything, or systems that don't integrate, that's where we need to sit down and think, okay, how do we fix this to make it sustainable? um, Exit planning. If you want to exit um, next year, guess what, that's not going to happen. Exit planning, you need to exit and think about more 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be something that you can do next year. It's not like with retirement or decide I want to sell my house. No, if you're the founder or owner, there's a very good chance there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done even before we can begin to entertain the sale. Normally, what I do, it'd be about a year to 2 years to get that business ready. And then when it comes to the sale process, it could take a year, could take less. A lot of it depends on how quickly and ready we are to go. But the point is, when it comes to exiting, you know, if you really don't understand the process, if you haven't started 3 to 5 years before you want to exit, if you don't even know of an M&A advisor or even know what route you could go, or how investment bankers or business brokers work, the reality is you need a fractional COO to come in. Some red flags. In fact, I'll give you some examples of immediate red flags. Due diligence keeps uncovering issues. Deals just keep falling apart. It seems like in their late stages. Buyers keep coming out for price reductions. You've had multiple attempts, and an M&A advisor might be saying, "Hey, you need about 18 to 24 months to prepare." These are red flags that something is not right. And by bringing somebody like me in as a fractional COO, the reality is you will be able to start addressing these flags. And that's really what the goal of my practice is to make sure that we're able to de-risk the business and address issues like this so that the business can go to market. So some other challenges, growth stage challenges. You're stuck and it just feels like you're going nowhere. And your infrastructure, it's just not set up. And, really a lot of the work that, a COO might do in coming in, it might seem like, okay, this is just academic. Well, the problem is what we're doing to document and make sure everything is streamlined, it's not really academic. Instead, what the goal is to figure out how to get everything structured so that way we're able to unleash the business engine and really let it grow and push forward. Team leadership gaps. This is prominent with a lot of businesses where, the business owner gets going and they may have a steady number two, but here's the reality. If we're going to get this business ready, you really need a team of 3 in leadership. And if you're going to be exiting, that's going to mean your number 2, well, they're going to probably be promoted to CEO. Who are you going to bring to CFO? Who are you going to bring in as the COO to help out? I mean, and depending on the size of the business, you may need a CHRO. There's even possibly going to be the need of, a CMO. So the point is, this is the building out this leadership team is something that is going to be an imperative when it comes to the exit planning process. Um, Industry agnostic indicators. Um, you know, if your interest is on solid operations and client delivery, well, you know, that's a good sign that you don't have to be getting something extremely specific. Um, and if you want the focus to be on operations expertise as opposed to industry consulting, well, here's the reality. Fractional COOs are industry agnostic for a reason. That reason is this: we work broadly with other industries, and good business is industry agnostic. Every business needs budget development and controls. Every business needs operations optimized. Every business needs process with policies and procedures developed. Every business needs marketing. In other words, all these areas that I work with, the reality is any and every business and any industry is going to need them. So, another big thing, budget consciousness. You can't afford a full-time COO, or you need executive guidance, but you really don't want to pay for 40 hours a week. My monthly retainer is $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year. And it's just that. There's no taxes or benefits. So, in other words, for $60,000 a year, you get me for one day. I provide email support during the rest of the work week, and you're able to get a COO at a fraction of the cost. Hence why the term fractional is really apparent. So, if you're budget conscious, hey, especially if you're not there and you don't really feel like you can afford it, a fractional COO is the way to go. Now, time constraints. You may not have time for a full leadership roundtable, and you really can't afford executive level help 1 day per week, or really, you can't even commit to 10 days a month. Well, I realize most C suites, there's a lot of times with executive meetings and department meetings, and since that's where we're going, the reality is if we're not there, but that's to where we need to be, the benefit of having a fractional COO come in and you're only working 1 day a week with high level strategy, you're going to get there. And you don't need to start there, but if you take the steps to get there, you will get there. Um, M&A advisors, it's possible you may be talking with a business broker or an investment banker, and they're saying that you need operational improvements before you go to the market, or they say you need to get your house in order, or there are some business operational readiness concerns. Well, if you're getting this from the person who's going to try to sell the business, think of it along these lines. You have a realtor coming in to try to help sell your house, and they immediately notice, you know, these walls look really grungy. They need to be painted. You know, I think we may have some structural issues, or there might be some termite damage, or I think there's some water damage. In other words, these are the parallels to what these M&A advisor comments that I've said are. In other words, you need to get them fixed and fixed now, or else you are not going to succeed in the sale process. Now, here are some observations that your financial advisor or CPA might make. Your CPA is looking and saying, you need to recommend, you really need to strengthen your operations, or your advisor says, I don't, I mean, you've built a great business, but, I think we need to get some things figured out in order for you to exit. Or, your wealth manager is saying, hey, we've been talking about your retirement and what you need financially. And while I think you got some good plans as far as what you're going to do post exit, I'm concerned that about the value, and I'm not sure you're going to get maximum value from the business. That's where you bring in a fractional COO. Of course, if you work with a SEPA, they will be using terminology of value acceleration, and that is a lot of what we do. Now, um, a commitment to exit is like, are you truly committed to an exit? I mean, if you're serious about exiting and you're not exploring, you're willing to invest, let's face it. Let's say you go with me for 3 years. That's a $180,000 investment. Now, if we're able to get the business so that way we're able to secure a really solid value, say maybe it was valued at say 10 million, but we're able to lessen the owner dependence, really get things optimized, and really make that attractive. And all of a sudden we start seeing offers of closer to 20 or maybe 25 million in value. Is that $180,000 well spent? Now, I'm not going to say necessarily we're going to have massive ROI like that all the time, but the reality is this. Even if we do some what you might think is cosmetic edits and we add some structure, the reality is that structure is going to be the difference between a private equity firm saying, "Yeah, I'll give you 10 million for it," and a serious buyer saying, "I like what I see, and I feel like in order to get this competitively, I need to give you 30 million." So seriously, if you're committed to an exit, there's a lot of value that a fractional COO can provide. The final area is openness to change. Now, I realize business owners have been very successful at things, and they've done things a certain way. However, if you are open to change, that is going to ensure that you are going to be very, very likely to gain substantially from the years of your hard labor. Here are some signs that you're open to. It's like, I need to make changes, or I'm ready to systematize things and document, or I want my business to operate without me. You may not necessarily think it, but these are some signs that you were open to change. And especially if you're like, I'm tired of putting in 70 hours a week. I want to live to enjoy life. I don't want to live to simply work. So these are some signs that you need to talk with a fractional COO and have some serious conversation about what you need to do. Now, my time is open. I definitely would love to sit down and talk. I mean, really, I've already kind of described the value that I bring here, but I realize that, you know, life being what it is sometimes we're like, well, I'm ready for this. Do I want to make the investment? Well, again, here's the reality. Even if I were going to be there for 5 years, you do the math, that'd be a $300,000 investment. Again, I work on a month by month basis. We can cancel it, need to have 10 days notice. So it's not like necessarily you're going to have to commit to 1, 2, or 3, 4, or 5 years. But the reality is let's say worst case scenario, it's 5 years, $300,000. If you invest that and you're able to ensure that you're able to get the value that you want, I think that's money well spent. So I would love to talk with you if you find yourself in this situation. And, really just want to encourage you because right now we're getting ready to enter into what's referred to as the silver tsunami. There are going to be a lot of business owners exiting. This is not going to be something that we're going to be able to do in 3 months. 3 years is more likely. And if you want to ensure that you have the best value, here's the reality. Take where you are, whatever year it is now. I mean, this obviously when I'm recording this is the end of 2025. But if you're watching this and say 2027, that means 2030 is when you're going to exit, likely. Maybe 2032. In other words, what you're exiting into is not going to be the current environment in which we're in. If things are tough economically, and every region's going to be different, but if things are tough now, they may be better when you exit, meaning you're going to get best value. If things are great now, well, we don't know what type of value you're going to get. The point I'm trying to make is this: don't let your decisions to exit today be dependent upon what the conditions are today, because the market and environment you're going to exit into is going to be far different down the road than it is today. It may be better, it may be worse. But if you are well positioned, regardless of what the situation is, you will be getting the most value you can. So, again, my email and phone number are in the comments in the description of this video, and I would definitely love to talk with you if any of you have heard anything that was said in here and decide, these signs, yeah, I need to pull the trigger here. So I would definitely love to talk with you and really help make sure that you, as you can see in the screen, are able to exit to begin the next chapter and do it successfully.